What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Joshua Void, and today on the Atheist Uprising, we are going to delve in to an Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses story, Scott Williamson. And this is going to be fantastic because me and Scott have gone back since 2019. And I see him as a good friend of mine, and as well as Katy Sykes, who's also a good friend of mine and also comes from Jehovah's Witness as well, an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So this conversation is really going to be good, and I think it's really going to be informative. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, Linear and Tart, for helping me do what I do, which is provide videos to you, the viewer. So thank you. And also, if you want, you can check out the description box below for Katy Sykes and for Scott Williamson's videos that they do. So it's going to be fantastic. But all in all, let's get started. I would like to introduce my co-host, Katy Sykes. Katy, how are you doing
Hello.
tonight?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Hope the viewers are doing well as well. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's
likewise. Because I think just like we had the talk beforehand, I think this is something that is definitely needing to come out because these cult movements, just like Jehovah's Witness, Mormonism, all the rest, need to be kind of brought out into the light more than they are. So that's what I really want to try to do with this show and also tackle the larger religions at hand. And I would like to introduce everybody to Scott Williamson. Scott Williamson, how are you doing tonight?
Hey! How are you guys doing? How's it going, Katy?
Yes.
I'm doing well.
Josh?
How are you, Scott?
I'm hanging in there, bud. I'm just having a great time with old friends. So
That's
likewise. Good. So, all in all, before we get started, maybe just a quick introduction for individuals who are new. Scott Williamson, we'll start off with you. So, what can you inform our viewers about yourself? Or what would you like the viewers to know about yourself?
Okay, so I have a background as a Jehovah's Witness as well as I've practiced other religions like Southern Baptist, more Protestant sort of religions. And that's the background that I came from. And I left Jehovah's Witnesses way back when, I'd say over 30 years ago. And since then, I've been an agnostic atheist. I kind of consider myself maybe a philosophical pantheist on a more, spiritual level or what have you. But I'm not really a religious person at all anymore. And I'm mainly an atheist when it comes to these gods and concepts like that.
Nice. And for me, I'm more of like a harder atheist than other individuals, or let's just say Gnostic atheist would be a proper terminology when it comes to certain things. Because for me, I think that if a person cannot describe what they believe in, the deity in what they believe in, there seems to be a difficulty in believing in that thing, right?
Yeah,
like if you cannot define it, then it is harder for you to actually have that sense of belief in it.
I agree with you. Like for me, I would say even I share the same thing. Like there's certain definitions of God that are just contradictions in themselves, and contradictions really can't logically exist. So in that case, I would know that God doesn't exist. He couldn't.
Exactly. And Katy, would you like to introduce yourself to our audiences? And also, I would like to thank you for actually being a co-host with me for tonight and for other nights as well. So I really do appreciate that. Is there anything that you want to tell our viewers before we delve into this interview?
Well, I think we covered it in the last two interviews that you did with myself, and we covered a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses and about my background within Jehovah's Witnesses. But one of the things that we didn't cover was obviously how Jehovah's Witnesses actually worship. We covered the structure of Jehovah's Witnesses and the hierarchy of Jehovah's Witnesses. And obviously what happens when somebody becomes an apostate to the faith or is disfellowshipped from the organization. So I'm actually really looking forward to tonight's conversation where Scott hopefully will be able to fill us in on the actual worship side of it and any similarities and any differences between other mainstream religions.
I would completely agree. I think that delving into this conversation, tonight's conversation, is going to be definitely beneficial because I think that individuals, including myself, who don't really know that much about Jehovah's Witnesses, can now really gain how individuals within the said cult actually have how they practice, in a sense. What is their kind of like day-to-day situation? What's their interactions with individuals from the outside, and I think this would be a really good conversation to delve into. So all in all, because I did also have a conversation with you, Scott, as well, a couple of weeks back. But would you like to also just state how long you were in the Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, sure. So I was part of them, I would say maybe 6 years, something like 6 years. And I'm counting the time that I started studying, and then getting baptized, and, then I eventually moved into being a ministerial servant. So that's like a Jehovah Witness who has like responsibilities within the congregation. So I was pretty serious about it, and I was putting in the hours as far as knocking on doors and everything like that. But as far as like the difference of worship and the kind of like the feeling you get from being a part of Jehovah's Witnesses versus a Southern Baptist or another sort of churchgoer, it's more formal. Jehovah's Witnesses are very formal, and it seems
Structured.
almost corporate. Yeah. And it's treated as though it's just true, and there's no way you can question it, and it's got all the answers. We've got all these books, all these publications to help you convince others of how obviously true it is here. And you can also tell just among ourselves, look at how we get along and how we love one another and how we treat one another, and see the family spirit we have here, and everybody plays along,
Right.
And so it's very, it's kind of like a very strict workplace.
Right.
So do you think that's due to brainwashing within the organization, or do you think that there's some sense that members of the congregation realize what is going on as in the bigger picture of things?
Well, I kind of think sometimes, if not most of the times, we brainwash ourselves. So we want to believe certain things. And let's just face it, if somebody's knocking at your door early in the morning and they're telling you something you don't even want to hear about or talk about, you're just going to tune them out and slam the door in their face like most people do. But there's certain people that, they enjoy having a conversation with Jehovah's Witnesses about this stuff. And they're very receptive, and they're very kind and polite, and these kind of people that may have other problems going on in their life like anybody else. And then this is kind of a way for them to deal with certain things in their life. That's kind of what I experienced when I became a witness. I had certain answers I needed, psychologically and everything, and spiritually speaking. And Jehovah's Witnesses seem to have filled that void for me. And so, but then, like anything else, you start to doubt. And I probably started doubting from the time I became a baptized person. But of course, you don't admit the doubts. You just kind of shuffle them under the rug, try to convince yourself, and that's when you're brainwashed. You're brainwashing yourself. It's like, I don't want to consider alternative explanations. I want to believe this. And so you consciously do this thing. So I think there is brainwashing, but we're kind of responsible for that too, though, because we were open to that for reasons, and we just didn't know maybe how to confront our problems in our life, and Jehovah's Witnesses came and swooped in, you know.
Right. And I think too, because I think Linear pointed out a very good point where she stated some people are also super lonely and want to just talk to anyone, right? So like
Mhm.
when you feel that you're isolated, when you feel alone, and then somebody kind of at one point knocks on that door and they
Mhm.
are able to tell you things that you're kind of like, wait a few seconds, I kind of agree with that,
Right.
I think that this feels right to me.
Mhm.
Then it's easier for you to be pulled or lured in a sense towards these type of cults in the first place. And technically nobody ever knows what they're going into until once they're in it, and then
Mhm.
when they start to
Yeah.
question,
It's too
that's
late.
when people
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
there was a lot of meetings I remember when I was in myself, and there was a lot of meetings that were specifically designed just to teach the members of Jehovah's Witnesses how to actually take advantage of lonely people, vulnerable people,
Mm.
anybody who may have this open mind to be able to listen and accept points that we had to make.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think too, right? Like that's the way how most religions and cults kind of like interfere with people's lives in a sense, is that they kind of understand that when the people are at their lowest point and when they're searching for something, that's when I can reach in and grab hold of that individual and pull them into what we believe in rather than having them choose out of their
Mm.
own rationale to come
Mhm.
to this thing,
Right.
you know? But all in all, would you state that the individuals, like the everyday normal Jehovah's Witness, is kind of, how could I say it, isolated from the general populace, and at the same exact time, they're kind of they're isolated from the general public, but they're also not necessarily told everything by the higher members of Jehovah's Witness in a sense. So they're kind of like within the middle of, how could I say it? I shouldn't say a loss of information, but it's more or less like they're kind of pancaked in like a rock and a hard place when it comes to gaining information about the cult that they're in, but they also don't have the information of understanding the outside world as well.
Yeah. Well, there's an authoritarian mindset going on um, there. So what happens is it's just like if you're in the military
Mhm.
and you join the military, you're no longer really part of the civilians population. Now you're a military person. This is where you go in to train and everything. But you also don't have access to all the information that comes from your higher ups,
Mm.
in your chain of command. And it's all understood and agreed from the beginning, And so it's kind of like that with Jehovah's Witnesses. They respect the fact that there's people that are higher up that are dealing with things and they don't share it with the congregation because they know that these people have authority in the congregation. They're elders specifically, and overseers and people like that. And so in this hierarchy, they respect it.
So it's kind of like a willingness then in order to want to be kind of like dictated in a sense or dictated to and how to live one's life rather than like a unwillingness or
Oh
something
yeah.
like that or being
Think
forced into
think
it.
think about the process. So the process starts something like this. You're in your house, you're not a Jehovah's Witnesses. You're not a Jehovah Witness, of course, you're just a regular person. Somebody knocks at your door and you strike up a conversation. You finally, it leads to a Bible study and you study the entire book, you know, before you decide you want to go to the congregation, or maybe even before that. I know I went to the congregation by the time I was halfway through the Paradise book, right?
Right.
And um so already you're wanting to go, you know, because all they're there for is just to teach you, read you what's in this freaking storybook, you know. And so you're just there taking it in and you're starting to like the information. You keep getting it every week, the same time. And then they start talking about how the early church and Christianity was organized. And then they say, well, this is exactly how we are organized in our kingdom hall, you know.
Right.
And they start kind of piecing things together for you. Oh, these are the elders. These ones were appointed to be shepherds, you know. And
Huh.
shepherds are humble people. They're very humble. You know, God appoints very humble people, people that you can trust, you know. And so you have all this information coming in already as you're doing your Bible study. So by the time you step foot in the congregation, you want to see all these things. I want to see
Right.
the elder. I want to see the ministerial servants. I want to see how it's organized, like the church we're reading about in the Bible. And you see it, you know.
Ah, okay,
And
okay.
so you're
So
like, "Ooh, good, good. I want to see that. I want to see that," you know. So it's not like it's an oppressive type of thing, you know.
interesting.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's kind of like being in a first it's more like a how could I say it? It's like a theoretical work in a sense. So like when you're looking at it, you're reading a book, you're reading these things, and you're the kind of like, wow, this is something that's
Mhm.
seems very logical, it seems very informative, it seems very
Mhm.
logical. And then afterwards, you're like, you know what? Maybe I want to go and check this out. Maybe
Mhm.
this is something that I want to be a part of. And then when you actually step into it and you see the
Mhm.
entirety of the
Exactly what you told and you read about,
Yeah.
it has an effect on you, you know.
exactly.
But then you're at the point of no return. Then once you've actually, accepted it enough to be able to go to your first meeting, that's the point of no
Mhm.
return. Because
Yep.
once you get there, they're going to shower you with love and admiration
Mm.
and all of that, and make you as joyful as possible. And not show you any of the hurt or the distress or stress or anything like that that any of the members are going through at the time. They're just going to show you all of the niceties of the organization and what the organization can do for you and how it can improve your life and solve problems for you and
Mm.
always be there for you, always support you. So then your acceptance of some of the beliefs and then that mixed with it, there's no going back after that. You're pretty much already in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it would seem, right? So just like how we stated in the first place, they kind of like hit you with the theory first, then they
Mhm.
show you with the practical. But by the time you're already stepping in and by the time you're already delving into the information, you're part of the ministry now and everything like
Mhm.
that, that's when they start to tighten the screws in a sense because like
Oh
they
yeah.
as Katie just stated, they shower you with love, they shower you with respect, they shower you with everything. But then at a certain point, they're wanting you to kind of step in line as well. It's not like shower you with love and then the decision is yours to do what you want with. It's kind of like, hey, like we're doing this for you, but at the same time, there's something that we want you to do as well, and that is to
Right.
step in
Yeah,
line.
it's a bit more subtle than that though.
Yeah.
So they will you'll get invited to one meeting a week, and only one meeting a week on the Sunday, and it's only half of that meeting that you're invited to, and that will go on for a few months, and you'll have all of the love and everything being showered upon you on that time. It's not until you actually go to all of the meetings and you become an unbaptized publisher. It's not until then that they're going to then start turning the screw and start the rules and the regulations and all of the other things are going to, and the life changes are going to come into effect.
Yeah. And, one thing I was thinking is that what they're exploiting is our need to have a social interaction like that. Like a lot of lonely people, they need to get out and join, social groups. And Jehovah's Witnesses provide a big social group for people. But on top of that, kind of pigging back off what Katie was saying about, it's kind of subtle the way they do love bomb you and everything like that. They have to be careful because at the same time, when you're new, you have to remember they understand these guys don't celebrate Christmas. These guys don't celebrate birthdays. These people go door to door every so often. Am I willing to do that? Is that something I can really see myself doing? You know what I mean? And so Jehovah's Witnesses know that, and they're suspicious that these things are going to make somebody not come back the second time or the third time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they have to be very careful in how they don't, because they already know there's a lot of pressure. Let's not be too much pressure. Let's just be a friend and give them a lot of community.
Interesting. So in a sense, it's kind of like a soft power that they use. They're kind of, so they're not really trying to like, okay, you're in, tighten the screw type of thing. It's kind of like, you know what, let's slowly but surely lure them in, kind of like an anglerfish leading a fish to its ultimate demise in the end, but it takes a certain amount of time before they're even attracted enough to that light.
The analogy that they use is the analogy of the shepherd. They view themselves as shepherds tending to a flock. So each of the Bible studies that each Jehovah's Witness will have, that's sheep to them, and they're going to protect them from the wolves. They're going to provide them the grass that they're going to graze on. They're going to shear them every now and then. They're going to look after them and make them love them. But in the meantime, they're going to be building a fence around them very slowly and subtly, so the sheep don't get startled, and eventually there's they're completely trapped in.
Okay, so that interesting. So it's kind of like you're being. It sounds weird that I'm about to say that, but it's kind of like you're being loved to such an extent that you're kind of not paying attention to the fence that's being slowly encircling you. And then by the time, if you even realize it, because some of them just don't realize that they're in a fenced area and they just continue grazing, right? And I mean, in the long run or whatever, they think that this is what paradise should be, in a sense, is kind of like a lot to be grazed on, and you as the shepherd, not as a shepherd, but as the sheep, need to be kind of like herded into a direction or whatever, and you're kind of willingly wanting to be herded in that direction in a certain way.
Well, they say, like the Apostle Paul used to always say, don't become a stumbling block for others. So the Jehovah's Witnesses understand that they're very serious, and there's a lot that is expected of you. To be a true Christian is to actually be busy at work doing God's work. And so they're always encouraging more hours in the field. Make sure you come to all your meetings, participate, study at home, do your own home studies with your family, Bible study. and always try to be there to volunteer at the Kingdom Hall for different things. And just, and they have, chapters in the Watchtower about that stuff, and,
Hmm.
and you'd read through it, together as a whole congregation. And they come around with microphones so that you can make a comment about the last paragraph, and what you are supposed to say is something in line with the paragraph, like something that agrees with the paragraph, like maybe an example or something like that.
Huh.
That way the whole congregation is encouraged, everybody's encouraged, they're all sort of supporting each other in following this magazine article,
Yeah. And to add a little bit to that, they also do this with children as well. So from a very young age, I mean, I remember being about 3-year-old, 4-year-old when I was first told to give a comment in the thing, and it just starts off simple, like just reading back something from the paragraph, and then as you get older, it'll be read something and then give a little bit of an example, talk about how that makes you feel, and and it just builds up eventually until you're fully brainwashed into it.
They have books on it that tell you how to express yourself. I remember one article in the Watchtower we went over on a Saturday was how to get rid of the permafrost. In the permafrost, they had a picture in the article of a guy's brain with ice over it, and so the whole article was about how we can be more natural. Like when we give comments at the meetings, are we just reading the paragraph, or are we giving it our own word and our own emotion and our own expression about it? Ask yourself, do you do this? Do you do that to show that you're more sincere of a Christian than just following the rules and following you know, be more sincere about it, like be real about it, which is really odd. Like, how do you command people to be real about something? That's something that comes from you, not from, just
Right. And that's the thing that I kind of, because it seems that they're mostly focused around group mentality and group think rather than sort of like you have your own mind, you have your own thoughts, and kind of just like you should be the captain of your own ship, which is you as a person. Instead, is kind of like, no, be part of this group, and with this group you can be safe, but outside of this group you're screwed, type of thing.
yeah. Look at it. They use the analogy of Noah's flood. And this Kingdom Hall is like the ark, and we're escaping the world that's doomed to destruction, and we're the ones who are being saved on God's ark of His kingdom. In His congregation. So yeah, they're always trying to brainwash you and appeal to your fears and your hopes. That's what they do.
That's very interesting. So just like how actually Linear stated just a while back, she stated that this sounds very predatory in a
Oh
sense.
yeah.
Like
Oh
you
yeah.
don't necessarily realize how predatory it is until you finally gone through it.
Gone
And then
through it, yeah. Because think about it, like this thing I was telling you about the Noah's flood being comparable to the congregation. Well, that's actually a talk. Um, we have scripted outlines for like when ministerial servants or elders gives their talks on Saturday after the Watchtower study, or before the Watchtower study rather. They give a talk, and in the talk they'll talk about, like, let's talk about Noah's ark, and they'll use the whole hour to compare it to the Kingdom Hall and to why you are here to be saved from the destruction that God's going to rain on the earth, and imagine you get those sort of talks every Saturday, and
wow.
along with your Watchtower study and your Thursday studies, which is really long, Tuesday Bible study, your personal study. Then you're supposed to be doing a family, so you have to take it upon yourself to teach your family the Bible, and they have little outlines that they want you to follow,
Wow,
I just want to say, you had scripts for doing those talks. You lucky twat.
They wouldn't allow
I had to
us.
freaking write them out myself.
They wouldn't allow us to put in too much of our own words, because it would be against it'd be going outside of the Kingdom Hall outline, because they were real strict about, you have to be within the guidelines of the brothers,
I suppose I'm more trusting of the members over here then.
Yeah, they must be. I didn't know that. They're not as cohesive as they like to sell it, are they?
So you're saying, as of right now, that you, Katy, you had to actually write them out, while Scott actually had a book that he had to read from? So are we stating that, like, how does this kind of work?
Well, I had to write some of it. Like, I had to put it in my own words. They give you an outline. So it's kind of like they give you the highlights of what you're talking about. But you have to write, you have to physically write this, your talk, of course.
No, we were just given a title and a main scripture that we were to base the whole thing off, and then I would start by cross-referencing that scripture with other scriptures, and then I would start writing it out like at sort of university level sort of writing to build up a full essay of it, and then that's what I'd be presenting on stage.
Well, you guys should have been ashamed of yourself. You were stepping outside the bounds of Jehovah's organization.
Can't believe it.
Can't believe tisk. Yeah, it's amazing. In the States, anyways, it was very, everything was pretty much monitored in some kind of fashion. It was just really,
Wow.
constraining.
Yeah, it seems that way. That way.
I suppose it makes sense because you were closer to the governing body, so being over in America.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's another thing too. So are all individuals, because I had that talk with Katy as well, but are all individuals dictated by the governing body? So the rules and regulations of the governing body is for everybody in a sense. And if people step outside of line, then you're screwed.
Correct. They are God's main or only channel on earth. That's our channel to God. It's through the governing body, those 7 men. So those 7 men get their information from Jesus Christ, and they're called the faithful and discreet slave, which is supposed to be this analogy of a faithful slave that entrusted God's jewels or the king's treasures or something like that. And so the governing body is that faithful and discreet slave, and we're God's, possession. And they're supposed to be shepherding us and, feeding us and everything. Spiritual food.
Wow. Okay, so we have a governing body that is appointed by God. And by the way, how is somebody appointed to the governing body? Does because I remember having this conversation with Katy, that Katy stated that it's sort of like in between divine revelation and kind of like appointment at the same time, right? Like the person themselves feel that they've been appointed by God, but at the same exact time, the organization also agrees with that as well and rises you up, if I do remember correctly.
Yeah, it's like they vote on stuff. It's all by vote. But they say that the vote was inspired by Jesus, the king. And so
Interesting.
if they call it like new light, whatever new information that the governing body releases through the Watchtower magazine, that's the spiritual food that the faithful and discreet slave feeds God's property. And so
Wow.
they get this information from God, and then they dispense it to us, the people.
Wow. But Katie, was I right based on my description, or did I get that off of it?
No, I think that's pretty much covered what I'd said before. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So this is now something that I'm very interested in, because if the governing body, right, dictates all there is with the normal lay individuals that are of Jehovah's Witness, that means, and just like how you stated, I think it was in the last interview, Katie, where you stated that Jehovah's Witness had written a book, right? But all of a sudden, that book in and of itself is now canceled or is now forbidden to be read because how different Jehovah's Witness is now compared to when it wrote the book back then.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. I couldn't remember the name of the book. Maybe you can, Scott.
The yeah, I know it. I know the book too. Kingdom something. Kingdom. Now you got me interested. Is this along with the collection of books that go through the history and everything like that?
Yes, I think it does. Yeah, because it had information about some of the early period
Mm-hmm.
of Jehovah's
Rutherford on
Witnesses,
up.
and
Yep.
they found that it was eye-opening to some modern witnesses when they were reading it, and and some people were leaving because they were reading some of the things that had happened in the early formation of the religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't remember, but I'm gonna look it up.
There. I think Neil's just come up with it. Hi, Neil.
Yes, the Kingdom Come. That's right.
What? So you're stating, and thank you, Neil, so much for bringing that up. Greatly, much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that this book, Kingdom Come, was is now forbidden literature throughout all Jehovah's Witness, no matter where the congregation is within the world?
Yeah, because it could be even considered apostate literature, because a lot of the people that didn't want to evolve with the movement splintered off and became like little subcults. And so they
Wow.
continue to teach the old books.
Interesting.
They're like the more
So
pure form of Jehovah's Witnesses.
so you're telling me that even Jehovah's Witness might actually be fragmenting in a sense into
Oh
different
yeah.
sects just because of this one book that has been removed from normal literature throughout the general Jehovah's Witness.
Hmm.
Now, other individuals that think that this book, Kingdom Come, is the actual work of God's word or something
Hmm.
like that,
Hmm.
that now they're breaking off and actually just
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that Rutherford and them did in the old times where they were like uh man, what's the name of this group? I can't believe I forgot who they are, but they're Masons. Yeah, he was a seventh degree Mason.
Wasn't it
Rutherford
called
was.
the movement that came from? Wasn't it the Millerites?
Yeah, the Millerites. Yeah, exactly.
yes.
And he was part of the Masons, and he developed his own. He tried to develop his own, religion, which was based on, revelations, like special revelations and predictions from the Bible. So interpreting the end of the world all the time through revelations and Daniel and things like that. And he came up with this formula and this prediction, even though he was wrong a bunch of times in the past. He predicted 1914 would usher in God's kingdom on earth. And it would be triggered by like world wars and great famines and upheaval in the world, and when the preaching would be in full effect and stuff like that. And then that would be the time that Jesus has arrived in heaven, as king over the earth. So sure enough, 1914 came and we got into World War One and the big plague, that happened. Spanish flu or whatever it was. And
Spanish flu.
Yeah, and a lot of the things, and everybody, and it really convinced people.
Oh no!
Well, we just lost Scott.
Oh no! Yeah, we just lost Scott at the moment. Hopefully, he can come back.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a point to what he was mentioning there while we wait for Scott to come back. Yeah, so one of the other things that was, I'm not sure whether it was in this book, but it was in one of the group of publications, I think, that Scott was talking about. There was, and it's one of the things that made a lot of people, when they initially read this book, leave the religion. And it was a letter that I think Rutherford in the 1930s, late 1930s, had written to Hitler.
Wow.
So he actually wrote a letter of support to Hitler and other leading Nazis. And in the letter, he was basically giving the Nazis Jehovah's allegiance, basically. So the organization's allegiance to the Nazi regime, stating that there was a lot of their ideals which Jehovah's Witnesses agreed with, and could they sort of work together, sort of thing.
What? Okay, that I didn't know that. So you're saying that Rutherford, in a sense, was a Nazi supporter? By giving that said allegiance of Jehovah, he was kind of putting, at that time at least, all of Jehovah's Witness underneath.
Yeah. Well, it's questionable as to whether that's what his goal was in the long run. I mean, maybe it was as simple as he could see that Hitler was going to be rising to power, and he saw it as because obviously Hitler was ending other religions, and was very was quite against the religious idea. Maybe he was trying to gain a foothold where Jehovah's Witnesses wouldn't be subjugated in some way.
Okay.
Or maybe he did agree with some of the ideals. I mean, we'll never know. But yeah, just the fact that letter exists, it shows a little bit more in depth the ideology of Jehovah's Witnesses, and how they conduct themselves. It can be quite different from the run-of-the-mill Jehovah's Witness beliefs that most of the members are quite used to.
Interesting. Okay, so we have information that kind of shows that, because as you stated, there could have been lots of implications to that letter as it was. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was a sympathizer. It could just mean that he was trying to have his new religion, in a sense, or his new cult thrive within that regime. in a sense, so that he wouldn't be persecuted or his group members wouldn't be persecuted like other members were in the long run. Interesting. So it's true. It could be that, and it could be other things, as you stated. It could be that he actually did believe in what Hitler actually believed in, or certain things that Hitler believed in. But all in all, if we look at where the Jehovah's Witness come from, we can definitely say, now, I don't like utilizing this term. I think this term has been used a lot, but death cult in a sense, because it's kind of like always wishing for the end of the world to occur, right? There has a tendency of always being, well, with this new disaster which is happening, the end of the world is coming, or just like how me and you discussed in last interview, that at first there has to be some great good that happens, that all the things within the UN are starting to be accomplished, and world peace is happening, and world hunger is solved, and so on and so forth. And that's when Jehovah's like, now I'm going to destroy everything that you just did, kind of thing. So
he's a sore loser.
Right, exactly. It was like, I was supposed to do that, but you did that, human beings. How could you? But all in all, I just want to figure out that how do individuals, ever since the first two callings, in a sense, of the end of the world, end of the world, with World War I, and let alone the Spanish flu, and then World War II, or not World War II, my apologies, the creation of the nuclear weapon and everything like that. And that second one that I believe that you stated it was 1976?
1975, I believe it to be.
Okay, 1975.
Don't quote me on that. Before my time, but
right. So 1975. And that didn't happen either. And so, as you stated too, so many people sold their homes. So many people were really preparing for the end of the world to occur, and it didn't. But yet it seems, and this is what I'm trying to utilize, is seems that Jehovah's Witness is still a force to be reckoned with. They're still kind of knocking at people's doors. They're still doing what they've constantly been doing, and at least making it seem that these two incidents, right, that should have been completely devastating to the organization in and of itself, didn't necessarily have that much ramification, even though that it probably did. But at least Jehovah's Witness today don't necessarily seem like they've been hit at all from these two incorrect predictions of the end of the world. Why do you think that is?
Multiple different reasons, but mainly because they have a very. Firstly, they've got a stronghold over the population of Jehovah's Witnesses. They've been doing indoctrination for years, and they've become masters at it. So they're basically in the leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses are, inside the heads of each of the members, and the members won't have thoughts of their own unless they're told to. So Jehovah's Witnesses were able to use that to basically just sweep everything under the rug. So when these things happen and things go wrong, they just sweep it all under the rug, and it's just like it never happened.
Welcome back, Scott. Welcome back.
Hello. Sorry for that. My access point crashed, so I had to reboot it.
It's fine. It's fine. It happens to the best of us sometimes.
Yeah.
But no, so that's actually a really good point that Katie brought up, because I was kind of stating that Jehovah's Witness today seems, and keyword on the seems, like it was not affected by the two times that they tried to predict the end of the world, but the end of the world didn't happen. And how do they seem to be thriving today? And how does it seem that they're like constantly knocking at the door, having conversations, everything like that, when other groups have been hit massively when their cult leaders say that the end of the world is going to happen and it doesn't, and all the people realize that, hey, these individuals over here, this leader that we supposedly is enlightened by God or whatever, what happened to the end of the world? And most of the people leave. But it seems like Jehovah's Witness, and Katy actually stated it very well, is that Jehovah's Witness seems to have like a clasp on some of, or a great hold on the congregates of Jehovah's Witness, to such an extent that even with two big mishaps on their part, they're still able to keep the congregation kind of united still and not. So why do you think that is? Katy gave an excellent example of why she thought that is. Could you why do you think?
I think if I remember when I had doubts, but I was like some of those examples we're talking about, they predicted the end of the world at this year and that year and that year. Doesn't that give me a red flag, that something's wrong? And it did. And I actually went and studied on it, like in libraries and stuff like that. But as in secret, But then I never really did anything about it. I just like, well, it ain't a big deal, and just kind of swept it under the rug because I was the one holding on so hard. There's a real strong need to be part of the community that overrode, the doubts and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it's all kind of emotional.
Okay. So the aspect is that sometimes, or not sometimes, but most of the time actually, is that individuals are holding on to the actual cult more than actually the mishaps that happen. So it's sort of like, okay, even though that this was wrong, like they still give me something. There's still that sense of stability that's there, and I wish to hold on to it. And that's,
at least it seemed that way. Like at
Right.
least it seemed that way to you as a member. To yourself, you're thinking, I need to hold on harder. I need to try harder to keep my faith up. No one was really knowing all the doubts you had necessarily. You know what I mean?
Interesting. So the reality, but do you think that there is a way that, because we do know that there is harms in believing in the Jehovah's Witness, there's a lot of harms that come with it, and also the harm of making you kind of subservient to individuals, which it slowly seems to me, at least, and I might be wrong based on my assertion, but it seems that their only thing that they care about the most, and this is the governing body, is that the individuals that are below them are giving them money in order for them to do their own projects with, in a sense. So, and let alone, they probably have a lot more things on the side that we don't necessarily know of, or that at least the normal, or not the normal, but I mean the people who are still inside of the Jehovah's Witness don't know about, right? And I've even heard, towards a certain extent, that the Jehovah's Witness is, in certain areas, or maybe as a whole, arming themselves or creating a military wing or something like that. I don't know if that's the case, but I've
heard that. That would be against them, because they didn't believe in guns and carrying weapons. Like you couldn't even be a police officer and be a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow. Okay.
You couldn't join the military. You couldn't join martial arts. Like
really?
It was a very pacifistic sort of religion.
Interesting. Okay.
You couldn't even be a security guard. It's
interesting.
Anything that would put yourself in danger or put other people in danger or protect people or anything like that. You couldn't do. As well as all the higher education as well. You can't do any of that. I would be very surprised if they were harming anybody. They're not a destructive cult in that sense. They're a psychologically destructive cult, not a physically violent organization at all.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So at least that information is proved, hopefully, incorrect.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. But all in all, because we do know that Jehovah's Witness psychologically has negative effects on individuals, do you think that there is any way that an individual can reach out to them in a sense? Because I remember having this conversation with you, Katy, afterwards, and I think you, Scott, were watching that show where you asked a great question. You're like, how do we interact with them? I don't remember the question that much. I think it was, how do we interact with Jehovah's Witness, or how do we
how do we talk to how do ex-Jehovah Witnesses talk to Jehovah Witnesses?
Yes. And that's where I was thinking, and I think Katy stated it as well, is that when they knock on your door, don't try to slam the door on them in a sense. Try to have a conversation with them. And at some point, you will break through, because that's the one thing that's bad with indoctrination, is the more that you're actually experience the outside world, the more questions come into your head, no matter, even if they are holding on as tightly as possible, they're the ones that are coming to you. And so,
and you know what got me out of Jehovah's Witnesses was someone who did street epistemology with me before street epistemology was even a thing. There was this atheist that I worked with who would ask me key questions and get me to wonder, how do I come to believe these things, And he kind of approached me in that way. So it wasn't necessarily like a get out of here, kind of way. It was more like, engaging me, trying to make me, think it all through, and I couldn't do it, which was a big red flag for me, and that's pretty much what made me decide I need to just walk away, because I was like, I could stay, but then I'd be fake and I'd be lying, and and I don't want that dishonesty in my life, you know what I mean? But boy, did they come at you when they find out you're trying to leave. They pile on. Oh, they pile on, man. They want to debate with you and all kinds of stuff.
Damn. Yeah, Katy was telling me certain things that happened to her, and it was just absolutely insane. I can't believe that stuff. And I can't believe, like, the organization that does stuff like that isn't able to be brought to courts or something towards that extent. Like, they're able, and as Katy stated, I believe also, is that they're putting some of their congregates into that general area of education, more for like law, more for being a lawyer, for being somebody who's within business and other things like that, in order to slowly but surely combat individuals who are trying to take them to court for whatever reason they are, I would guess.
I mean, they have built into their, theology that brothers don't take brothers to court. It's right there in, the letters to the Corinthians, from Paul, about brothers don't take brothers to court. And they take it very serious. And they're like, why? Because there we shame Jehovah's name. So they don't want to embarrass the congregation by letting them know about all of these dirty things. Remember, you will recognize them by their fruitage. And Jehovah's Witnesses are the fruit of the fruit of the fruit, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I remember those scriptures and the pressure that was put on me when I came out to the elders and told them about the abuse that I'd suffered, the sexual and physical abuse that I'd suffered for 10 years as a child at the hands of my stepmother. And they pushed really hard to not have me go to the police. And they were just expecting me to accept that they had solved the issue by demoting or removing my father as an elder. That's it, handled. You know, she committed it, but I was never happy with that. Obviously, I still went to the police because she didn't get punished. He did, and he was being abused by her too. So yeah, I wasn't happy with that. But somehow they managed to stop the police investigation. So even though it was about to go to court, I'd been in discussions with the police, and they'd been gathering evidence for months. And all of a sudden, just a couple of weeks before the court date, the officers came back and said, "There's nothing we can do. It's been dropped." So you know, I can only assume that they managed to do something, threaten the witnesses or something. I don't know.
God dang.
Man.
Shit. But that's the thing. Like for me, a lot of times I feel that like when stuff like that happens, that there needs to be more pressure on this group. And that's one of the main reasons why I think that showing Jehovah's Witness for what it actually is and what it actually stands for, which is not the actual congregates, but their own well-being, rather than the well-being of their congregates and everything.
And it works out perfect for them, because at the end of the day, for those people who doubt now, who see these court things and they see these scandals within the congregation and they get discouraged, well, they can always say, look, this is just persecution. The world is persecuting us like they persecuted Christ. You know, they charged him for things he didn't do to make him out to be a bad person. And Jesus, what did he tell us? Even worse things will happen to you. You know, so they would tell you, don't be surprised at the world coming against us like this and, you know, trying to criminalize us. They did our Lord that way too. You know, so they had ways to twist even that situation in their favor. Like, this is the evidence that we are the chosen ones.
That is true. I think, but the thing is that there needs to be pushback against groups like this. Though, what is the pushback? I'm not particularly sure, because even as you stated, Scott, they can use that as something to, again, actually either grow their followers or put more fervency within the followers that they already have. And if that's the case, then you're not really helping anybody. You're just allowing people to become more intertwined within the belief itself.
They just dig their heels in. And,
yeah.
You know,
so I was just wondering, is there any way in order to combat the Jehovah's Witness, or is it sort of just like hope to get one by one the individuals that come to your door and just slowly take congregates from them, in a sense?
That's what I engaged in shortly after I left Jehovah's Witnesses, as I would talk to other witnesses and try to help them come out like I did. Try to talk to them about it and let them know, you know, this is brainwashing and stupid, you know, and it's not easy, but at least you can plant seeds, you know. And I was doing that, and I still talk to religious people all the time and part of these groups like Fight on the Fence, and we talk about religion and epistemology and things like that. But it's hard to say, man, because I think religiosity is sort of ingrained. It's part of our evolution, somehow.
Mm.
And it's really hard to really fight that natural. You have to train yourself into things like logic and epistemology and things like that. It doesn't come natural. So it's hard to reason with people that aren't using reason to begin with, in my opinion. And it's just at least the same kind of reasoning. You know what I mean? Like they're reasoning in a different way than we
Right.
are. And it really breaks down the communication because we're not talking the same language anymore. We're talking past each other.
I agree, but there's. Sorry, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as well that when you look at the figures of Jehovah's Witnesses, they have always remained like minimal growth. They bring in a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people leaving, and now the numbers seem to be dropping a little bit. So it shows that there's less people joining and more people leaving. I think what needs to focus on a little bit more and what can help a little bit more, instead of trying to push to convert people out of the religion, is to focus on helping those who are leaving the religion. Because just because they haven't, they have doubts now, and those doubts are building up, and that's led them to leave Jehovah's Witnesses. It doesn't mean that they're strong enough to withstand other thought, other indoctrination from other areas, especially when because they might have never used the internet properly before, other than to look on jw.org. They come out and they start looking across the internet, across YouTube. They don't quite understand the way that these networks work, and they can get drawn into alien theory and other wild and crazy ideas, which is quite similar to the indoctrination which they went through as Jehovah's Witnesses. But they're still damaged and hurt and need support to be able to ward off all of I can't remember the name for those sorts of things. Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think that's the thing, because I completely agree. The number one thing that one should think of is that instead of going directly at the source, there are individuals who are leaving. And I think those individuals who are leaving need the most help so that they don't get pulled into any type of other indoctrination that is out there that can be detrimental or have a negative effect on them as well. And that's why I do agree with that we do help out those who are leaving or who have left but are looking for another community. I completely agree with that. The only thing that I kind of see, though, is that sometimes, too, with an organization that is like this and stuff like that, and other organizations that are out there that are literally utilizing their congregates in order to be sheep, in a sense, is something that, for me, aggravates me, that they're still standing, and not standing in but I mean that they're not being brought to justice. And that's the number one thing that I want to try to do too, is to bring these groups and bring these organizations that are threatening individuals, that are harming individuals, that are indoctrinating individuals into the wrong thing, should be brought to justice.
Yeah, that then becomes a political matter. I mean, there has been inquiries into government and non-government into religions such as Jehovah's Witnesses and the abuses that have been taking place. There was one a couple of years back in the UK dealing with child sexual abuse within religion. and Jehovah's Witnesses obviously were on the bench for that one. But nothing ever came of it, and nothing really ever comes of the other inquiries into it either. And it's mainly because the political, it's not big on the political scape. So politicians aren't putting enough funding into this, enough power to the actual heads of the committees and for the inquiries and things. So so if we're going to go down that road, then we're going to need to get more political power.
What would be, what would kill?
That.
I think one thing that would kill Jehovah's Witnesses would be if these sort of scandals were addressed by the UN, like by some sort of some world organization of humanitarian organization,
Yeah. Especially with their teachings about the UN. I mean, they believe UN to be the, they're always going on about the United Nations and how they're the direct organization for Satan, and that gets, thrown down the throats of Jehovah's Witnesses all of the time. So it sort of shows that the governing body, they are scared of the UN. There is some fear there that the UN will do this eventually.
Well, it's just so funny how they always use the UN and the World Health Organization and all their stats and all their situations to highlight certain points in their Awake magazine. They always do that. Like when they talk about.
Well, they were members for 6 years, weren't they?
Yeah. And so they do a lot of PR for them. And it would just be so funny if they were written up for being a danger to human rights violations and stuff like that,
Right. But I think, too, the thing is that I also think that there needs to be a group, right? Because that's the whole entire thing. I don't necessarily think, because I think Jehovah's Witness is too small, that the UN isn't necessarily going to focus on it. And just like how Katie stated,
maybe the FBI or something.
Yeah. So I think that there has to be a group of individuals dedicated, right? And it's not necessarily that we need to have more political power. What we need to have is more economic power in order to tackle this group and in order to bring this group to justice, in a sense. Because that's I think the real issue is that how do we create, because I think that so many people, and definitely other atheist groups that are out there, though don't get me wrong, I do enjoy them. I don't think that they are thinking of, okay, well, this organization is really bad, let's do this, like let's take them to court, let's do this, let's try to look through all the things that they have done that is against kids, against their own congregants when they leave, and all the rest of that, and then really come together. Because if we look at the atheist community, there's such a force and an economic force, and let alone a huge reserve that can be tapped into and utilized into actually hitting these organizations like Jehovah's Witness with such a hit that is kind of, they will be brought down a couple of pegs. And then even with their statements, they're kind of like, well, we got to relax now. We got to change things, unless we're going to keep getting hit. And
I think more people need to stand up and actually take them to court, like actually get the police involved and get things done, instead of being scared to come out because you don't want to piss off the elders and stuff. They just need to step up and take action. That's where the solution's going to be. And that's where we need to really be pounding it and talking about it and bringing it out there. Because really, the United States of America, this government isn't big on shutting down religions. Like that's something they really shy away from. They don't want to risk anything like that. That's huge. And 99% of Jehovah's Witnesses would be against that. You know, they'd be like,
big time.
yeah, we're victims, but we're also trying to tell you, leave us alone. You know, like, how does that work? You know, so they don't want to be mixed up in that kind of controversy. It becomes too political, you know. And so the best thing I think is just educate people, you know, let people know, look who Jehovah's Witnesses are before you let them in your house and, you know, get swept away, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do
But we
think,
also,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, yeah, but we all just following on from what Scott said. I mean, we also know the how much money that the organisation spends on covering up court cases and paying off, you know, settling out of court and you know, court fees and things like that, and compensation, obviously. You know, so the more people that can stand up and successfully bring cases down on Jehovah's Witnesses, you're going to hit them where it hurts, you know, in their pockets, and eventually, with enough money lost, they won't be able to cover it up from the members anymore. And they're going to have to disclose why they're spending all of that money.
That's right. And that's the whole entire thing. Like, because there's always ways, because I know, and it's very difficult when you're alone in order to tackle such a large organization. It's just like the person doesn't have enough money to tackle them. And as you stated, they can pay off the police, they can pay off the judges, they can pay off whatever the situation is. And you're kind of left in the dust. However, you get enough people together, you get enough income, you get enough wealth together, and now you're kind of like a force to be reckoned with against the Jehovah's Witness, let alone start bringing people who have had things happen to them and say, it's okay, we're here to help you combat those individuals that did that to you. And slowly but surely, you will start to see, I think, a complete, just like how Katie stated, a complete tacking at the funds that Jehovah's Witness has.
But
and
can you imagine? But there's something just occurred to me, maybe a little off subject, but
sure.
Can you imagine how dark and uncaring you have to be covering up heinous crimes like that? Like, you're someone who's supposed to be a shepherd of people, that you proclaim to be a shepherd of your sheep and God's properties, you know, and yet here you are covering up, you know, when their children get raped and stuff like that. Like, can you imagine how evil that is?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, I think that ties into a bit of what I mentioned on one of my shows before, when I was talking about my past and my experiences as being given power, more and more power within the organization. And one of the things that I remember and that I found at the time was that it's sort of designed, especially those who are born into the religion and who happen to be boys. You're sort of groomed into narcissism. So you're given this power and this love and all of that, into the point where you want that love and you'll do anything to get that love and admiration from those that are following you. And eventually that leads to, you know, severe narcissistic disorder in a lot of these elders, and especially into the Bethel and you know, the higher echelons of the religion. So at that point, it's sort of, as long as they get what they need, which is that love and that admiration, they're willing to do anything, you know, no matter what that is, even if that includes covering up rape and you know, child sex abuse and things like that. They'll cover that up just so they can get that pat on the back and that you know, that nice admiration from the rest of the flock.
You know, that's the weakness of them, you know, philosophically and everything else. You know, they have no, this spirituality they speak of. They have nothing like that. They have nothing but ego. You know, they just have a lot of ego. They want to be, you know, seen as the superior, you know. on everything, and that's their mentality, is to be approved and and to move up in the ranks and be recognized by your congregation, your fellow members, be an example and all of this kind of stuff. It's like, it's very sort of egotistical,
Yeah. I was thinking, that was making me think there about the times when the circuit overseer would come to visit the congregation, and how they would just like strut in and they'd act like they're on the place and everything, and they just do whatever they want, but they're getting all of this love and admiration. Everyone's inviting them to their homes and making them meals every night, and and everyone's fighting to get them to the home, and or fighting to partner with them on the field service, and
the little gods.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be an ego. You've got to have a big ego to be able to deal with all of that and think it's okay that the people are acting like that around you.
Exactly. They're blessed. They feel blessed.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's just, it's crazy where you can have such, at first off, as you stated, such love within an organization and kind of like caring for one's flock, and then you see on the other hand all this heinous shit that's happening, all this like craziness that's going on, and all this kind of like cover up and stuff. And you're just like, what's going on? Like, it seems like both of them are kind of like balancing out. There's the good aspect, but then after, you really don't realize how bad it really gets until you see what's covered up. And when you see,
I think generally the people that come to the Kingdom Hall are very sweet, kind, courteous people. Obviously, they're very courteous, very nice, very well spoken, very careful with their words, and everything. So they have that respectability about themselves. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's the whole misleading thing, is that's the face. That's what you see coming in. It's all this stuff you're mentioning that goes on in the higher ups and behind closed doors, in order to cover up scandals and problems, because, there's a lot of members that have sexual hangups and situations,
Yeah, they're always looking at the how green the grass is. They're never looking at that at the mud and how it's actually not mud and it's made of shit.
Exactly.
Very good. Very good statement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to close down the show soon, but before we do, I'm going to give Scott Williamson his last statement, and then Katie her last statement. Then I'm going to do mine, and then we're out.
Yeah. Just thanks for having me on, man. I enjoyed it. I always enjoy speaking about this subject and my history on this thing, because I think it's very important that we know who these people are, and if we are interacting with them, what we can do to actually help them get farther removed from that situation.
I agree.
Brush up on your epistemology and street epistemology, and how can we help these people, question their beliefs.
Agreed. And Katie, how about you? Your last?
So basically just following on from Scott there, and what Scott said. I mean, it's important to work at building your knowledge on Jehovah's Witnesses. So go away, do your research on the organization. There's plenty of research out there into Jehovah's Witnesses. A good place to start is Lloyd Evans on YouTube. Very knowledgeable in all of this and can provide a lot of evidence. And then use that the next time that you are speaking to a Jehovah's Witness at your house. Show them the things that are wrong with the organization, and maybe, just maybe, you'll open their eyes to the truth.
That's right. Very well said. Very well said. And also for me, as I always say, I'm a little more upfront, is whenever you have an opportunity, first off, always read. Reading is beneficial in order to keep your mind sharp and in order for you to actually be more rational when actually interacting with theists or individuals who utilize, like apologists, for instance, who try to bamboozle you with philosophy. But the reality is that they're using philosophy as a smokescreen in order for them to kind of grab you and pull you into a whole new cult in order for you to be indoctrinated by something else. And that's all what religions are. Religions are just larger cult groups, and that's predominantly it. So remember, read up, build up on your street epistemology, learn some philosophy as well, because it will help you, and also learn on some sciences, because that will help you to become fully well-rounded within having conversations with theists. But predominantly, because not all theists are philosophers, build up on your street epistemology, and that will definitely help you interact with them and start and having them see a different world from the world that they're coming from or that they were indoctrinated into. So that's the beauty of street epistemology, that's the beauty of philosophy, and that's the beauty of science. And again, I want to thank our patrons, my apologies, Linear and Tart, much appreciated, and thank you for letting me do these things, these wonderful videos that help give information to you, the viewer. Now, and also, if you do want to check out, please like, subscribe, and if you look at the link below, you will see our Patreon page. Check it out, and if you want to help us, you can do that. All right, have a great night, everybody, and see you next week. End.